In part one of this partially infinite series, we looked at former atheist Ayaan Hirsi Ali talking with Alex O'Connor on the Without Pushback podcast. We learned of the tremendous despair which led Ayaan to Christianity, and how she's now attempting to gaslight us all by pretending her conversion was an act of keen observation and intellectual rigor. Let's pick up where we left off.
But then, of course, I don't live in a vacuum. I look around me and I saw similar in many ways. I know my story is unique, but in many ways it's not that unique. There's a great deal of, I'll say, disconnection in our society. And people have left whatever it is that rooted them in their society and in their families and in their communities. And for many in the West, that was Christianity. And so I've come to see that it's not just the personal, but on a community level, even on a civilizational level, the throwing away of Christianity was, I think, what was the saying, throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
But Ayaan, that baby was a genocidal monster. That baby hates women and all of my friends who are not heterosexual. That baby hates believers like me. That baby said that slavery was not just okay, but gave us instructions on exactly how to practice owning as property other human beings. That baby stood as a bulwark against so many of the values you still cherish, Ayaan. Freedom of speech, to practice any religion or not, the right to a free press, and separation of church and state. In the 1,000 years plus prior, that baby had every chance to establish due process, the right to privacy, equal rights for women and minorities, and instead fought against those ideals at nearly every turn. On the other hand, that bathwater was nice and warm, filled with the golden rule, concern for the poor and downtrodden, forgiveness. And we didn't need all the baggage of Christianity to embrace those ideals. Others prior to Christianity advocated likewise, and without the threat of eternal torture or punishment in the here and now. That baby needed to be tossed, and still does, right into the ash heap of history. Sorry, babe.
I'm reading a lot. Reading the Gospels, I'm reading Old Testament, New Testament, I'm reading the Apologetics, and a world is opening up for me that in many ways I find so fascinating and enriching. And I will not tell you that I can explain the miracles that took place in the past century. I can't explain them, but I do choose to believe in them.
As anyone would who felt that their happiness and indeed their very life depended on believing them. But what about those of us for whom that's not the case? What about those of us whose intellect has not been compromised by despair and a desire to end one's own life?
Faith, as you know, you have faith. There's no. This is, I think, where it's important to separate reason from faith. Is I'm not going to prove it, and you don't need proof. You believe, and so having embarked on that path, I find what I read strengthens that faith more and more each day.
So she's reading stuff which strengthens her faith more and more each day. Take note of that. There's no hint that she's reading anything which challenges her faith, and I wouldn't expect that at this stage. But notice where she goes next.
It's a pity. This is sort of a statement to my fellow atheists, to lead a life of constantly fortifying yourself against faith. And then in that way, you create a counterfaith in non-faith. And you don't allow even a tiny opening, because you're creating these barriers around, you don't allow any. We used to say, one thing I liked about the Enlightenment, and I still do, is don't prejudge. Come to the table with no preconceived notions about what you're going to hear or see. And that's not what my fellow atheists were doing. They were just really fortifying themselves against ever believing. And they had very solid preconceived notions. And then that in itself became a gospel of its own.
Who the hell has Ayaan been talking to that she thinks atheists, even new atheists, have any kind of gospel they follow? Atheists dumped on Hitch. They dump on Richard. They dump on Sam. They dumped on Dan. Me, Matt, Seth, Paul, Drew. Atheists are the least cohesive group of people I have ever been involved with. About the only thing we all agree on is that the evidence for a God is absolute shit. And even then, we remain open to new evidence, should it actually present itself, after thousands and thousands of years. This is just so much projection. Maybe that's what Ayaan did when she was an atheist, but many of us came already having that background in faith, in Christianity. We already knew that side, Ayaan. You know what? I'll bet you $10,000 that I and Paula Gia and Matt Dillahunty and Seth Andrews will still know more about Christianity, its history, and its apologetics than you will after 10 years of study. Because atheists like us have been studying Christianity for decades already. This is a bit more than condescending. And from a woman who's just stepped into the ring, a total amateur, a baby Christian. Ayaan, you talk about atheists building barriers, but you've just admitted that you are reading stuff, and I'll bet nothing but, which strengthens your faith more and more each day. That's a hell of a barrier you're building there. You are fortifying yourself against doubt, and for reasons we all understand, which have absolutely nothing to do with discovering the truth or being open-minded, but rather to protect your psyche. Totally understandable given your situation. But please, don't gaslight us now and try to make us think there's anything more going on here. You want Christianity to be true. You need it to be true. And you're not allowing the tiniest opening for doubt.
And so there is the new atheism. This is what we believe in, versus the people who believe in God. And then again, it has a bit of a tribal element to it, where this is, that's you and that's me.
This is just another example of Ayaan's profound ignorance. Is she genuinely unaware that there wasn't even the possibility of there being a that's you and that's me for more than 1,000 years of Christian rule? And it's so much worse than that. Aside from the Jews being screwed over constantly and kicked out of Christian countries, England, France, Spain, etc., one's differing on a point of doctrine or an opinion of the Pope could get you literally locked up, tortured, and even murdered. The Cathars were wiped off the face of the earth for the crime of heresy. For Hitchin's sake, the doctrine of discovery gave explorers and immigrants from the Old World God's permission to think of any non-Christian as subhuman, without basic human or property rights. That's how Christianity spread all throughout the world, and why native peoples were decimated, forced into converting, and lost their tribal lands. Jesus, Ayaan, get your nose out of those apologetics books and read some actual Christian history. The excitement and the thrust of the new atheism was about finally, after nearly 2 millennia of threat to life and limb, atheists were able to speak their minds freely and push back against the indoctrination of religions based on the tribal war god of Abraham. It was about finally removing the wall of protection religion cocooned itself in forever, keeping it from criticism and giving it an air of respectability it never deserved.
People listening will think, well, no, atheism is just a disbelief in God. Here's a worldview that's being presented to me and I'm saying I don't believe it. What is, in your view, as formerly one of the most important figures in the New Atheist movement, what can you now see as the gospel of New Atheism? What is that? What is New Atheism's 10 commandments? What does it look like as a worldview?
I think the reason why it was called New Atheism was that it had this, what do you call it, this evangelizing aspect to it. Because yes, you're right. Atheism, or to be an atheist, is simply to take on the attitude of say, I don't think there's any proof. Convince me. If I see evidence of the existence of God, I might change my mind. So that attitude hardened into something along the lines of there is no proof, there is no evidence, therefore I don't believe in God. And not only that, people who believe in God are wicked, they're dangerous, they're stupid, they're superstitious, and therefore we must evangelize against them.
No, Ayaan, it's not about evangelizing against them. It's first and foremost about exposing the moral monster who is worshipped as the source of all goodness and love. It's resisting this wicked ideal which turns people's hearts and minds into useless organs of servitude and ill will towards their neighbors. It's resisting a book which insists that we embrace a being who demanded genocide, misogyny, homophobia, intolerance, servitude, etc., and requires us to honor that being as the model of love and moral perfection. What would Ayaan call people today who defend genocide, including the murder of babies or slavery? How about misogyny and homophobia, the murder of young girls whose hymen broke prior to intercourse and people attracted to their own gender? Is she saying that wicked, dangerous, and stupid aren't good descriptors? Now, obviously, that's not every Christian. But that's what's in your holy book, Ayaan, all of which has been put into practice at one time or another. Well, that's all the time we have for this video, but stay tuned. There's so much more to come. Next time, we'll discover what a closed-minded person Ayaan was when she was an atheist, how Christianity has opened her mind, and how Christianity has been a fountain of curiosity throughout history. That's really hard to say with a straight face. Until then, I'm me. Thanks for watching.